Hey Carson, the only impossible mission is you getting any bitches. Dude, what the heck?
I'm gonna be ranking every Mission Impossible movie from least best to best. But seriously though, there is no bad film in this franchise. So let's just jump into it. In last place, we got Mission Impossible 2. I want to make it clear, just because this is in last place doesn't mean it's a bad film. I actually still really enjoy it, and if I had to give it a score, it'd probably be like a 7 out of 10. You know, it's still a great movie, but it's not on the same level as all the other films. And to be honest, I would much rather watch this film than a lot of random action movies that are being put on streaming services lately. But there is definitely some problems with this film. For example, there's definitely parts of this movie where it doesn't even feel like a Mission Impossible film. You know, they try to do this like weird romance thing with Ethan Hunt and the woman character. I don't even remember her name. There's also parts where, you know, it feels like a John Woo film, obviously because he directed it, but I feel like it kind of clashes with the Mission Impossible ideas. The first half of this movie is very slow, and there's just not a whole lot that goes on, but then the second half is just non-stop action, and that's where you really get to see John Woo's style. And I think that's one reason why some people don't like this film, is because they probably think the slow motion and the doves and all that weird stuff is too cheesy, but I actually really enjoyed it. Still a great movie. Before I give you number 6, what I'm about to say is a very unpopular opinion, but I will say that number 6 is miles ahead of number 7 on the list. In number 6, we got the first Mission Impossible movie. For those of you who don't know, this first film is actually 30 years or so after the franchise started, because there used to be a Mission Impossible TV show in the 60s. Just because I have this film at number 6 on the list does not mean I dislike it. I genuinely would give this film like an A-. And I think one reason for me is because I'm that annoying guy who just wants to see cool action when he watches an action movie, but in this movie's defense, it's more of a spy thriller. I might be wrong here, but I don't even think Ethan Hunt ever actually shoots anybody with a gun, which is crazy. So although this film is definitely on the weaker side when it comes to action, it's honestly way ahead on certain other things, like some of the thrills you get and some of the spy aspects. In number 5, we got Mission Impossible 3. I love this movie, and I still think this film is underrated. Philip Seymour as the villain is just great. He shows this level of like intimidation and confidence in his character where us as the viewer are like genuinely freaked out by him. And I think part of that is because, you know, a lot of the story revolves around Ethan's wife, which makes the movie feel a lot more personal. This is, you know, the first film in the franchise with like really big action. I think it's really fun. Something I appreciate about this movie is a lot of the action feels like it's, you know, handheld camera, so it's like shaky and, you know, it feels like you're there with them. There's just certain fun things I really like the ending of the movie is in the beginning. And then, for example, the device, the rabbit something, I forget what it's called, something rabbit, you don't really know what it is. So it's just, you know, you're kind of using your imagination trying to figure out what it is. I think one reason why this film might not be as good for some people is because the whole last act almost feels like something that would be in the middle of the movie. It's really just Ethan running around beating up bad guys. But I kind of like the way that the last act isn't as big as other parts of the movie. It has a more personal feel, I guess. I don't know if that made any sense. One more thing, that bridge scene is just insane. I love it. In number 4, we got Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. If I'm being honest, number 4 and number 3 on this list are really interchangeable, and the top 4 in general are just near perfect movies. One thing I love about Rogue Nation, honestly, is it has like pretty much all my favorite characters in the franchise. Jeremy Renner's character is in this film, as well as Rebecca Ferguson being introduced, her character Ilsa. Her character just fit with Ethan Hunt's character so well. There's obviously the plane scene right off the bat in the beginning of the movie. I think this movie has some really great humor. So number 5, number 6, and number 7 in this franchise are the same director, and you can kind of see that, but I actually don't mind that because the first 5 movies, it was different directors, and they brought the same director back for number 6 and number 7. Obviously, the action is very well done. This is just a fun movie, and I think this movie had a pretty good twist, too. In number 3, we got Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. You know, in some ways, this could be my favorite film in the franchise because I think it's the most fun. You know, like, if I'm going to rewatch a film in this franchise, 9 out of 10 times I pick Ghost Protocol. I think one of the main reasons it's so fun is because every time Ethan and his friends have a plan, it goes completely sideways, and it makes the film just funny because of that. I also love Jeremy Renner's character. He's introduced in this movie. He's probably my second favorite character in the franchise. I think this film has the best gadgets out of every film. You know, for example, that whole sequence with the green screen thing and it's going forward and it looks like the wall behind them. That is I love that sequence. And speaking of sequences that I love, the whole skyscraper sequence, I've said the word sequence like 20 times. The whole skyscraper sequence is not just my favorite in the film, not just my favorite in the franchise. It's one of my favorite sequences of all time. It is so thrilling. Like, that is one of the... Ghost Protocol is one of those movies that I really, really wish I saw in theaters back in the day. And number 2, we got Mission Impossible Fallout. I'm curious as time goes on if number 2 and number 1 on this list will change. And the reason I say that is because this literally has the most thrilling action I have ever seen. This is the definition of a top tier action thriller. The whole last act of this movie does a really, really, really good job at like layered conflict. You know, there's the bombs, there's someone getting hung, there's helicopter chase, there's all sorts of things that make this whole last act truly feel like an impossible mission. It makes the ending of the movie very satisfying. This film in particular kind of feels like it brings the franchise together as a whole because it fleshes out Ethan's character in a way we've never seen before. It brings back his wife, and it has ties to the first Mission Impossible. It does everything so perfect. Also, Henry Cavill steals the show. He was such a good character for this film, where he's like Ethan's sidekick, but he's also the antagonist. And I feel like if you're a casual viewer of this franchise, you remember this film because of Henry Cavill. That's how good of a job he did. In first place, we got Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. So this movie was just epic. And I know I say epic a lot as a joke, but no, this film was epic. And I'm curious if it's recency bias as why I have this on number 1, but I have had 4 or 5 days to really think about this film, and it's perfect. I don't really even have any complaints. This movie is very long, but it doesn't feel like it when you're watching it, which is crazy to me because there's really only like 5 or 6 main sequences. But one thing I like about that is every sequence is so memorable. I love the airport sequence. I mean, I love all the sequences, but the train one's very memorable too. Them trying to escape Rome. There's a lot of new characters, and I enjoy all of those new characters a lot. Hayley Atwell's introduced in this film. This felt like her breakout role in some ways, which is crazy because she's been Peggy Carter in the MCU for like 12 years now. I think them using AI as like the big thing works really well in 2023. If you don't buy into that idea as much, you might not love the film as much, but I bought into the idea, and I think that's one reason why for me this film is like a 10 out of 10. It's very fast-paced, very thrilling, amazing action. This film was just awesome. I don't know what else to say. I honestly appreciate how even though this is a part 1, it didn't feel like a part 1. It had like a full beginning, middle, end, and I'm very, very excited for Dead Reckoning Part 2. In conclusion, the Mission Impossible franchise is so awesome. I think the first 4 are near perfect movies. 2 other ones are A+ movies, and then even the worst film in this franchise is still a great fun watch.